Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. We are here for a special city council meeting. It is Monday, April 27th, 2020. We'll start the meeting tonight with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Nordstrom.
Here.
Roberts. Stroman. Armstrong. Lewis. Lehman. Drury. Evans. Drew. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to have an invocation from Pastor Craig Moore, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pastors are spiritual leaders over this city. And first of all, I wanted to say from the pastors, thank you to our mayor and our city council for the work that you do. We have begun to meet for the last 16 months. We have met for prayer over this city. And as spiritual leaders, we've begun to dedicate this city to God. And what we've done in doing that, I believe, has had an impact on our city. And one of the things that I've felt strongly about doing tonight is to give thanks to God for His blessing and His faithfulness and His protection over this city. When you begin to think about the amount of cases of coronavirus over this state, and yet in Pennington County, there's been relatively few cases, only one active case now, and only one hospitalization in our city and in our county. That is truly amazing, and so I don't think that's just because of social distancing, and so we believe that God has protected this city, that His hand has been upon this city, that He has blessed this city. And so as we pray today, I just want to say thank you to the Lord. I say thank you to you and for the work that you do, but I'd also want to give thanks to God. I believe God deserves some thanks and praise for what He has done in blessing and protecting this city. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you, God, for your love for this city, for I know that you love us and you care about us and you care about this city. And we have dedicated this city to God as spiritual leaders over this city. And I pray, God, that you will pour out your Spirit upon this city. I pray that you will pour out your Spirit upon this mayor and upon the city council, upon those in leadership over this city, and upon every member of this city, God, and over this county, over our police and firefighters, Lord, and those who serve this city so diligently. We pray, God, that you will be in direct involvement in our city, to better our city, to loose the bonds of injustice, to do a work over this city that is truly supernatural. I ask, God, for your guidance and your direction over decisions that are made. Give wisdom and counsel to those that are having to make very tough decisions, Lord. Decisions that are weighing heavy upon their hearts. I pray that your peace will rest upon them. May the Spirit of the Lord guide them and direct them and give them, Lord, your peace. A peace that is beyond our own understanding, as your word tells us. So, Lord, we just thank you and we praise you. We give you all the glory and the praise that is deserving of you. And we ask for your guidance in this meeting today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the republic for which it stands, nation under God.
Thank you, everyone. And now for the adoption of the agenda. We have one item on the agenda tonight, so the council needs to adopt that for us to proceed. Is there a motion? So moved. Motion by Armstrong, second by Roberts to adopt the agenda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're all here. Opposed? Motion passes. We're going to skip the general public comment time, go down to non-public hearing items, the non-consent item, item 1, and open the public comment period on that item number 1. We have received a number of email public comments tonight through our submission form. Those have all been forwarded to the city council members for their consideration. And we have a few people here in person tonight who are going to speak. And we're going to start with Tunchi Weaver. So at the podium, everyone has 3 minutes. You can watch these traffic lights over here to see how you're doing. Except Tunchi probably won't be able to see them because I'll let you know.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know that tonight we have one item on the agenda. So I encourage you to find solutions for this current situation that are workable, practical, that the businesses can reopen. I just want to remind everybody that we are Americans, and America is optimistic. It is not pessimistic. We have been focusing so much on the negative side of the equation, we forget that the survivability in our state of coronavirus is something like 99.6, depending on the exact numbers that were filed today. That's great. Those are great odds. In a state that thrives on gambling, we really should trust the people with their own level of comfort where risk is concerned. America is also a place where dreams are realized. In the weeks that have preceded this meeting, we have also learned that it's a place where dreams can be destroyed with bad decisions. So I would encourage you to, we find ourselves in a hole, let's stop digging. There are worse things than dying. I will echo what the pastor said. We do give thanks to God because we have had his protection. We have to trust in the Lord. A fearful and faithless people acts irrationally. And really, again, there are worse things than dying. And one of those things is dying alone and afraid. I have a sister that I can't even go see because she's in an assisted living situation. She is lonely. And there is also healing in the human touch. Interaction is very important, and we can do that and still be cautious and take precautions. We've always done that. When I'm sick, I avoid my family and vice versa, but you still have to care for the sick. You still need that comfort when you are sick, that people will care for you and that your family who loves you will come and see you. So with that note, I know there are here business people here that want to speak to you. I ask you to hear their issues because they have the reality of business to deal with. And that is how our city runs. That's how we all operate. That's our tax base. So I encourage you to lift this terrible lockdown. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next, Michael Calabrese.
Thank you for listening to me here today. I appreciate it. I've been here a couple times before, so I'll keep it very brief because these meetings have tended to run into marathons. I was opposed to the previous closures because, again, it caused undue burden on certain businesses in the community while not taking the overall health and safety of the community into account. This effort, I think, is a much better founded. It certainly does a better job of sharing that burden throughout the community and focusing on the health and safety of all the citizens. I wish that we'd have better leadership in Pierre that would be speaking on our behalf statewide and advocating for policies that make sense on a statewide basis, but to this point, we haven't seen that. And so again, I appreciate your efforts to keep our community safe. And I think these guidelines and this proposal is much better, again, to split that burden throughout the community and not to disadvantage certain businesses over others when we all need to be invested into the safety of our citizens. So thank you, and I'll let the other business owners here speak.
Thank you. Scott Langeth.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for the opportunity to speak, and thank you all for your efforts to protect the citizens of Rapid City. I'm Scott Langeth, and my wife Jennifer and I own Buffalo Wings and Rings on Sheridan Lake Road. We've been closed now for the past month, and we had implemented social distancing rules for 2 weeks prior to our closure, except for curbside and delivery. Just using curbside and delivery is not a sustainable business option for us. While the citizens of Rapid City have been very supportive, and it's been incredible to see, it still doesn't meet what we would need to stay open. If it wasn't for the payroll protection program, we would have closed. Our restaurant, like many others, is a more controlled environment than many businesses that have remained open throughout this closure period. We have a designated host who greets people at the door, takes them directly from the door, directly to a table where they're seated. They are in a controlled environment where they stay there, except probably to use the restroom. What's happened over the past month is people are more aware of social distancing just in general society, so their ability to stay in their area will definitely be more frequent than it was before. We are much more controlled than a grocery store, a hardware store, or other retail businesses where people are wandering through the aisles. We know exactly where everyone has been. We can clean exact areas, whatever they've touched, where that is not the case with other businesses that have remained open throughout this closure period. And while those businesses have remained open and virtually everyone in Rapid City has used those, we still have not seen that spread across the community. And those businesses with very little control have remained open. So the spread hasn't happened. The restaurants in our industry are able to control our guests and our customers, and we're able to handle that in a way that is better than most other businesses. Restaurants are fragile businesses, as you can see, throughout our community. They open and close, come and go. It's a fragile market. That payroll protection program is good for 8 weeks, and then the funding runs out. Most of us are into that a few weeks. There's not a lot of time left to try to get this engine restarted. I believe we can do it in a safe way, where we're socially distancing, and there's a good compromise here, and I hope you will revise this ordinance in a way that allows us to get back and hopefully get on our feet, and hopefully most of us will be able to make it through this. I'm afraid some won't. So I urge you to consider adopting an ordinance or an amendment to the ordinance that allows this to happen, so that we can get our employees back to work, off unemployment, and we can get the economic engine at least on its way to recovery. So thank you for your time.
Bob Fuchs.
Hi, I'm Bob Fuchs with the Firehouse Brewing Company. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for everything you've done so far. I totally back everything the City Council and the Mayor have been doing, and I think the calls have been dead on. We're now in a different situation, and we have new data to run off of now. And so we're backing, or I'm backing, and the Firehouse is backing the latest proposals that we've heard from Mayor Steve Ellender. We totally believe in the 6-foot spacing. We can deal with that. We can reopen our business and live underneath that rule. What I'd ask is to look at the math a little bit more. 6-foot spacing is actually about 28 square foot per person. The 125 125 square feet is closer to 12-foot spacing. That doesn't work for our restaurant. We can't be open and we can't be a business with 12-foot spacing. We can deal with 6-foot spacing, that works. One other thing about the 6-foot spacing is that works out to 28 square feet. That is also approximately the distance or the amount of people in an establishment. If you take the occupancy load, which is written on the front entrance of every business in town, you divide that by 2, and you have approximately 28 square foot spacing, or 28 square feet, about 6-foot spacing. So if we just took the occupancy load and divided by 2. Also, one last thing is, it just came in a little bit ago, the city of Omaha is doing just that. They're going to take occupancy load divided by 2, and that's where restaurants will be. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Alexis and Matthew. And could we have your guys' last name when you get up there, please?
The last name is Sullivan.
Okay.
You go first.
We had to close down because the takeout model was not appropriate for our restaurant. It just didn't work. It wasn't going to work. We didn't have the volume of the product to make it work. We kind of brainstormed, awesome, and came up with something that worked fairly well. A week later, it seems to be going pretty well. The only reason I would say we are still in business right now is the community. They have overwhelmingly supported us, gone out of their way to make sure we have everything we need. And in all of that, again, they have kept their 6-foot social distance, and we have 2. So I guess what I would ask is, I would assume you're going by an honor code. I would assume that in order to, you would not be able to enforce this on a regular basis, and so you're trusting us. I would say trust us even further. Trust us all the way. That 6-foot social distancing works in our restaurant. We could do that, but we can't do it under this ordinance. It's not enough. We can make sure that everybody.
Like the math, like Bob was saying,
Yeah.
the 125 square feet for us, our restaurant, like including our kitchen and our dry storage space is 1,700 square feet. So kitchen is a little bit on the larger side. So if you guys could relook at that math and really think about the 6-foot instead of exactly Bob put it very eloquently, we agree with that. We did have just one question in regards to restaurants for people wearing masks, in regards, like, is that a front of house, like the servers, your hostess, and the cashier, is that them wearing masks and gloves all the time? And then is that also in the kitchen? I've only worked in the kitchen for a brief amount of time, and standing between, even with a hood that has air conditioning, a flat top, and all these other things, it does get really, really hot back there. And with the proper like N95 mask, that is what is being called for from the CDC. I wore it one shift and I was like close to passing out. It was really hot. So I'm just curious on if you guys can answer that question, because right now, doing the takeout model, I know that I've gone through drive-through places, they don't have masks on right now. So why would that change from previous to now? It's just a curiosity, so. Thank you guys,
Thank you
and
for your time.
we support being able to reopen. We want everybody to succeed, and the community support has been great, but we would like things to kind of keep going for us, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve Winia.
Good evening again. Thanks for having this special meeting and not delaying it any further. I believe it's time for us to get back to business. We can safely do this like I've repeated so many times up here. I believe like the last young couple there, I think you have to have a little trust in us, you know, trust us a little bit. You know, give us a little rope, trust us. Check on us, that's fine, trust us, you know. That's a good, I think that's a good motto, and I think not so much for my business, but for the restaurants, I think something like Spearfish adopted, possibly 36 square feet per customer, is much more realistic than the 125. I think it's gonna be so hard for the restaurants at 125 square feet. I don't know how many of them will even attempt it. So I appreciate your consideration. Let's get everything opened back up, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa? Record? Is that right? Yeah. Oh, looked too easy.
Thanks, yeah. No, that's my name. So first of all, yeah, thank you all for having this meeting and serving our community. We're very lucky we have a great community here. And I'm here just to ask you to really consider and look at this information we're getting about this virus that is deadly. And we're getting different information every day. And it's frightening. There's a lot of people dying. There's a lot of sickness. And the CDC just yesterday came out with 6 new symptoms, you know, saying a headache, a sore throat. So we do not have adequate testing. Right now we're moving into allergy season. So if someone were to have a headache and a sore throat, how do they know that that is from allergies, or how do they know if it is from the coronavirus? So that was one point I wanted to bring up, as well as if they just, you know, released scientific evidence showing that the highest contagious period is actually 2 to 7 days before people start showing symptoms. And if you look across the world, we are not different from people that are dying from this disease. But one thing that we do have is we have an opportunity with this time to see the effects. There's a village in Japan that opened within 3 weeks of opening. They were forced into an emergency lockdown. You know, Rapid City, we've got a great community. I think a few people touched on that. Rather than trying to force us to fit this old system and reopen these establishments when distance is what we need to protect our people, our key asset, what if we refigure that? We've got so many creative people. Could we come up with a task force to help our restaurants work outside of this box that we know? Come up with family fun night or hang out with your friends night, you know, that kind of thing, a delivery service. They bring the glassware, the food, the games, I don't know. But I know we've got great people with a lot of resources. And that's what we rely on you, council leaders, to keep us safe. And right now, I ask you, I beg you, please look at the facts from the medical profession. And please, you know, right now the country's on the cusp of opening. What if we wait a couple weeks? You know, what if we wait and see? Let's let them do it first. You know, if nothing happens, great. If something does, we can be on the other side of that and think, how can we do this differently that works for us? So, yeah, I think that covers pretty much everything that I was hoping to discuss. Thank you for allowing me to talk. Thank you for caring about all of us, and we will get through this. I know there's a great positive solution we can come up with. So thank you.
Thank you. And now, Anna LeBeau.
Greetings. My name is Anna LeBeau. I'm a member of the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska. I'm an executive director of a local nonprofit who works with primarily Native American families who are in the lower to middle income threshold. I'm also an 8-year resident of Rapid City, a mother and a daughter. I come to you today as a concerned resident, a mother of a son who has asthma, and a daughter of an elderly mother. I come to you as a person who cares about this city and the people who also work and live here. First, I commend you, Mayor, and members of the City Council for making the tough decisions to protect this city. I understand you are in a position who were voted in to make the most informed decisions with respect to the growth and development as well as the health and well-being of the economy and the people of this city. With this in mind, I ask you to please carefully consider the population who are without health insurance, the population who are at risk, the elderly, those with compromised immune systems, those who suffer from asthma, those who have more than one family in a household. I understand our business owners want to get back to work. And as a woman with a degree in finance and a degree in economics, I know the city is taking a hit, but I cannot for the life of me come up with a dollar amount that is worth one life. Our city is full of history and is a community of culture and serves as a safe space for over 74,000 people who have not been impacted by COVID, as our neighbors to the east in Sioux Falls. But I believe it is the restrictions you have placed on the community that has kept us safe. In my opinion, I believe the locally reported numbers of COVID-19 are due to lack of tests being completed, in addition to the countless numbers of those who are asymptomatic and are leading us into a false sense of security. I know tourist season is around the corner, and it is people who love to visit our beautiful lands who may carry in the virus who will put us at risk. I wish the country had shut down for 30 days to let the virus die, but that is not the case for our state nor our city. And so the next best thing is what you have done, which is to close with as much control as possible. If we stay closed through May and reassess prior to Memorial Day weekend, we may have a better chance at keeping the curve flat. We are watching other countries possibly go through a second wave, and we see coastal states lose thousands of lives. We are less than 1 hour away from one of the largest native populations, and this could have irreparable ripple effects on that population. I thank you for your time and for this opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. And now, Dr. Marvin Beener.
Good evening, and thanks for letting me talk about this tonight. My name is Marvin Beener. I'm a OBGYN practicing here in Rapid City since 1993. I've been following the COVID-19 pandemic with great personal and professional interest. I have 2 elderly parents with significant medical comorbidities living in assisted living in Mitchell. I have a son in California who had to self-quarantine because he had symptoms and couldn't get access to testing, and I have 2 other children. Plus I have responsibility to all of my patients and to my staff to keep them safe. So this is near and dear to me. I supported fully, and I want to thank the mayor and the city council people who have been so responsive to me and my communications. The transparency and responsiveness is just overwhelming. I supported the mayor's and the city council's decision to limit gathering places in certain businesses in an attempt to try to keep this infection flat. And it certainly seems to have worked beyond all expectations, especially without a statewide mandate. And so here we are, looking at a successful management plan and deciding what the next step is. Last week, the mayor proposed reopening certain businesses in a well-thought-out, well-crafted plan to protect the citizens and to keep the businesses open. I understand the economic burden of the community, of the small businesses in the community, because I am one as well. I found out today that I have negative income for the last month. Thank you. But that's the way it is. But I have to say that I can't support implementing this plan now. And here's why. We don't know what the prevalence is in our community. Nobody does. Most communities don't know either. But in places where the prevalence has been tested, it's anywhere from 2 to 20% of citizens have been tested positive. That means we have a huge majority of patients, people who are immunologically naive and are susceptible to the infection. And we have to assume that that's probably the case here. We've just now begun to do serologic testing, and at $100 a pop, we're not going to have widespread availability of public health information, and the immediate testing is not available and won't be available for some time. So the uptick in numbers of infections isn't going to be known for 2 to 3 weeks, because the illnesses and the deaths and the hospitalizations don't occur for 7 to 14 days. You can't monitor this disease using hospitalizations and deaths. Until we have widespread testing, I can't support implementing this plan, no matter how well crafted it is at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Taylor Wolf.
Hi. Oh, okay, to begin?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Taylor Wolf. I'm a senior at Stevens High School, so I guess I'm coming here with a generational view. But I'd like to start off by reading a following passage from the Rapid City Journal regarding our response to the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Throughout much of 1918, Rapid City newspaper readers may have viewed themselves as insulated from the pandemic while it spread across the world. Some stories in the journal played down the flu threat, even during the last few days before it assaulted the city. On October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1918, front page headlines in the journal said, "Influenza on increase, though it's not serious. Influenza in city, not yet danger. More cases of influenza, but not dangerous." Then suddenly, on October 6, 1918, the tone changed. "Influenza has reached size of epidemic here," read a front page headline in that day's newspaper. For the next several weeks, the city was under siege. Churches, theaters, schools, the public library, pool halls, etc. were all closed, and hospital admittance was limited to the only most urgent cases because so many nurses were sick. What we are seeing now is in many ways identical to the tragic illness that led to those deaths 100 years ago. Just as no vaccines or treatments were available to our community then, none are available for COVID now. So if we choose to delay our response, like our city did 100 years ago, our actions will certainly stand as a testimony to the age-old saying, "Those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it." Because if we had confidence in our isolated position 100 years ago, there's no chance we'll go unscathed in our modern and interconnected world. Undoubtedly, not only myself, but my entire generation and all of those to come will remember this pandemic. It's likely that someday my own grandchildren will flip through a textbook to find a page entitled "The Coronavirus Response." They'll read through it and they'll hear stories of triumph, stories of those who risked their lives day after day to save us strangers, the politicians who listened to the experts and enacted smart policies to save countless lives, or the many business leaders, especially small business leaders, who stood with their employees through eyes of compassion and understanding. Though lying on the page will also be the actions, or rather the inactions, of those who stood in ignorance. Those who ignored the science and its realities. Because no matter how much one wishes for this to simply disappear, for businesses to open up and for life to return to normal, the reality is that in order for this to be over, we must listen to the experts, and many of which still believe we have a long road ahead of us. The grim reality is right in front of us. More than 55,000 Americans have already lost their lives, and hundreds of thousands have been infected. Many top health experts warn that if we open too soon without proper testing and contact tracing, we could see a sharp incline in cases or potentially see a second and vastly more deadly wave. One that wouldn't just stop the economy, but could cripple it. Reflecting this, here in South Dakota, Governor Noem has warned that 30 to 70% of South Dakotans could become infected, and thousands here could potentially die. Our own friends, family, and neighbors. With the state's peak in infections not projected until mid-June, now is the time to repair, not to relax restrictions, or to put the experts on mute. So while South Dakota remains as one of only 8 states in the country to not put in place a statewide lockdown restriction, we do have the choice as a city and as a community to maintain smart policies that will help save lives and slow the spread of this virus. Therefore, I wish to remind all of you that the decisions this council makes today and over the next following weeks will impact something more important than anything else. What these decisions are dealing with are human lives, and a premature opening puts potentially thousands of them at risk. It's reckless and irresponsible in nearly every way to underestimate this pandemic. We cannot set Mother Nature's meeting minutes. She runs the timeline. And though I understand the pain of many families now out of work, or the small business leaders in our community, including a family member that runs his own, we have to remember that no life is worth the risk. So as you continue making decisions and guiding policy in the community, don't forget the medically vulnerable and elderly whose lives are especially at risk. Each life is more important than anything, because 100 years ago we learned the consequences of being unprepared. Innocent human lives were lost, and therefore we cannot ignore the virus and believe in a fallacy of isolationism or denial. There will be a day when it's safe to start the incremental process of reopening, though now is not the time, and it's likely weeks or months away. But if we continue to remain resilient and patient in protecting the lives of our friends, our families, and our neighbors, I'm certain that we'll come out of this stronger than ever. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Taylor. Appreciate it. Nick Uri.
How's it going? My name's Nick Uri. I'm here to represent the Grand Gateway Hotel Cheer Sports Lounge. Today I bring gifts. I got a copy of George Orwell's Animal Farm for every one of you. There's a little bookmark in there for me. George Orwell wrote this book back in 1945, coincidentally 11 days after we dropped the nuclear bomb in Japan. I only did one book report in high school, cat's out of the bag. Economics class, The Animal Farm. History class, The Animal Farm. English class, The Animal Farm. It worked for every single class. It's a good book. Book summary real quick is basically, it's a bunch of animals, they stage a revolt on the farm, and the book was written for children so they could understand how governments can take away rights. And they use the farm and the animals as an example. The book is full of quotable quotes, but one of my favorites is, and I think the one that best applies here, is the following. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And as a kid, you're supposed to grasp, well, aren't rights for everybody? And what does it mean to be more equal? These businesses have been shut down selectively, not across the board. So you could say all businesses are equal, but some businesses are more equal than others. And behind those business owners are people. So you guys are specifically taking away certain individuals' rights. You guys need to think about that. And that's all I got. So here's your guys' gift, and I really think you should read it, because I feel like I woke up and it's an Orwellian world. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody Fry.
Thank you for letting me speak last minute. I don't have anything prepared, but I just have a couple of comments I'd like to make. I know what you're doing is a hard job. Everyone appreciates it. But after reading some article, or the article in the newspaper Mirror, where you were quoted as shopping at the box store and seeing hundreds of people, and the other, at the last meeting, John, you were at a box store shopping with hundreds of people. I think that the requirements have been really unfair to the backbone of our community. Everyone here knows how to run their business. Everyone wants to keep their employees safe, their customers safe. And I've talked to a few restaurant owners downtown, and they said they can't even seat a family of 4 at a table. Now, this is ridiculous when we have families and groups of people shopping in the box store aisles where there's 7 people, a husband and wife and their 5 children, walking up and down the aisles, but we can't have a restaurant seat a family of 4. It's injustice. It's not right. This is America. They have a right to open their businesses and take care of their customers. The other issue on behalf of casinos, because I do like Deadwood and I do appreciate what the casinos do. It's not necessarily a social gathering place. There's a machine, somebody goes and plays it. They're 6 feet apart. There's no reason that we can't get these businesses up and running. we all have a choice if we want to stay home or if we want to go out. And I would like to get back with a land of the living and be able to go out for dinner. I would really appreciate you guys opening back up our town and letting us do what we do best and taking care of our customers, our employees, and the families, the community. And on a different note, I just want to thank Darla, Bill, and Becky for their comments on the Fitzgerald Stadium last week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and that's the last of our public comment speakers. And so we'll close the public comment period. And so now we move on to the item number 1. I'll read this into the agenda, and then I'm going to take a position at the podium and give a presentation. And following that, Laura Armstrong will have a presentation, and then we'll go to council discussion. So item number 1 is to approve an emergency resolution 2020-034, modifying the mandatory orders relating to public gatherings contained in Ordinance 6413. Yeah, let's do it. So we're going through a remodel here at City Hall, and one of the parts that's been on back order is the part that allows us to dim these new lights. So when we turn these back on, they're going to strobe just like you were back in high school. So this is an outline of the plan to ease the restrictions here, and this is really so that you can see our or see my thought process behind the whole thing. First of all, a bit of terminology, and this isn't a big deal, but I'm guilty for helping to create some of this false terminology. But we don't have a retail closure, we don't have a shutdown, we don't have a lockdown, we don't have a stay-at-home order. And we have not defined essential or non-essential businesses in our ordinance. We've never used those terms, but those terms are often quoted back to us. And in fact, some businesses have requested that we give them a certification as an essential business so that they can keep operating. But we've not done that. We have a narrowly focused ordinance affecting 8% of Rapid City business and 11% of its employees. And this ordinance was based on a point-in-time analysis of information available leading up to March 20th. So the situation in early March 2020, everyone really started paying attention to the coronavirus activity. I mean, lay people, like most of us in the room, started paying attention to it. And largely we were watching the outbreaks in China, Italy, Spain, some early outbreaks and deaths in Washington State. There was a retirement home there that was heavily infected in Washington State. So the early predictive models that we saw coming out then were by large universities that were making predictions of the peak. We heard a number of terms really, or paid attention for the first time to these terms. The peak of the disease, infection, the infection rate, illness, and death. All these predicted in these early models. And social distance concept was introduced, and the curve became a household name. So also we look to the experts, the doctors, the CDC, the World Health Organization, and we learn of things such as 30 to 60% of the population may be infected. We hear early on in this analysis that estimated up to 80% of those will have mild symptoms. The hospitalization rate quoted early on was about 20%, and about 5% of those hospitalized needing ICU beds. So immediately we were informed of a testing supply and a personal protective equipment shortage. Soon the focus became that line on the curve, on the chart, that depicted the maximum hospital capacity either in our states or in our local regions. So our initial assessment and response, early March 2020, we were learning that this is a new strain of virus, and even the experts were saying, honestly, we don't know everything we need to know about this virus. The behavior, the spread, the ease of infection, whether or not you're immune, a lot of unknowns. We saw the early state response. They were using a variety of models. We never saw them, but we did hear that there would be no closures of businesses directed at the state level. So that really led Rapid City to evaluate the information available to us and use our authority under state law. Two statutes that we used for that, one of which, a statute specifically allowing us to take action to prevent the spread of disease. That was an 1890s law, last updated in the 1930s, and no one around here can remember ever having used that statute. So the Rapid City Council made a decision to act following the CDC guidelines. It was a very specific guideline at that time that when you have community spread documented in your state, that bars, restaurants, and fitness facilities should be closed. So City Council passed an ordinance which became effective March 28th. The situation today, looking 30 days later. Today we have U.S. data widely available. All 50 states plus all the U.S. territories now have data available at our fingertips. So we don't have to pay attention to China and Italy and Spain anymore, and Iran and many of these examples that aren't a great fit realistically for U.S. comparison. The hospitalization rate locally, regionally, has appeared to be about 25% of the original prediction. Originally predicted at 20%, now in East River it's been 4.5%. The Smithfield plant in Sioux Falls serves as an example. You get to draw your own conclusions from that example. This is a place where perhaps co-workers were too close together. There were reports of healthy worker bonuses given, encouraging workers not to use sick leave and to show up. And we've seen now also a large immigrant population working at these plants. And so even the state has recognized the fact that many of the workers are living in the same household. So there was a pretty good peak of infection, pretty good outbreak in the Sioux Falls area related to Smithfield. However, across the river, slow onset of the disease in western South Dakota. Our major employers, Monument Health, Ellsworth, Black Hills Energy, and more, have had something, they've had an advantage that Smithfield and the large employers in the Sioux Falls area have not had, and that's time. They've been afforded time to prepare, to learn from some of the examples, both East River, South Dakota, and around the nation. And so I think we're in a better position for that fact. Also, the community has had time to adjust to social distancing standards. It's a little unwieldy to meet someone, to be introduced to someone, and I think now a month later we're finally at the point where one of us isn't sticking out our hand to shake hands out of habit, so we're becoming more adjusted to the social distancing standards. The medical community in our emergency preparation has also benefited from the additional time afforded to us. So here's kind of the side-by-side analysis what we have on the left, March 27th, leading up to the ordinance, and on the right, April 20th, which includes more information that we did not or could not have known a month earlier, including our eyes-on observations of the community willingness to participate, and the realization after seeing month-old information that the plan deserves to change as time goes on, just as the situation does. So the scope of Rapid City's ordinance affects 8% of Rapid City's business, or about 300 businesses. The other 92%, as that's been well documented here throughout the last month or so in public comment, the other 92% are open. The big box stores are open. All of the other businesses are open. So 8%. However, interestingly, and this is all anecdotal, this is all an estimation, when the ordinance went into effect March 28th, 8% of the community, or 8% of those businesses were not shut down on that day. Many were shut down leading up to that time. And as far as Rapid City's employees go, those 8% of businesses also equate to 11% of Rapid City's workforce. So we have 89% of the people still working. But when the ordinance took effect, as many as half of these 11% of the employees were already out of work. Many businesses had closed, either through a corporate decision or through some personal decision on the part of the business owner to close, and because of the information available. So we think, anyway, I think the ordinance put about half of that 11% out of work that following day that it was approved. So anyway, 11% of our workforce, about 4,700 employees, are now out of work. So the testing. Testing is controversial because if you have an opinion about it, you're about to get beat up by someone who has a different opinion about it. It's an emotional topic. It's a topic where we all want some kind of comfort to feel better about the global analysis, or at least the national analysis of this disease, to find out who really has the disease and who doesn't. And so going back to the global shortage of testing supplies, I think there's some reason to believe that's resolving to a little bit, that we're in a little better position now than we were, say, a month ago. But there is a shortage of supplies, so we're not about to have widespread testing. So in South Dakota, our testing on average has been about 1.2% of county populations, of all the counties that report an infection. About 1.2% of that population has been tested, and in Pennington County we're 0.49%. Now that's not 1.2%, but a few days ago it was 0.3%. So we're going up a little bit in that testing. So the tests are following the viral activity through the screening process, when they're asking the questions and they're specifically targeting people that they feel have the best chance of having the virus, and they're giving those tests out as a mechanism of rationing those tests. And so when there's some illness breaks out, maybe there's some hospitalizations, there's some tests. If those are positive, that's likely to bring more tests. And as we saw with the Smithfield outbreak, that really upped the game in terms of testing for the state. A lot of tests were diverted, focusing on those areas of outbreak. So the tests follow the viral activity and the symptoms. So at this point, it doesn't appear widespread testing is appropriate because, first of all, the state is going through this rationing of tests. And there's a certain amount of us lay people who want a test to know if we had it, to know if our family member or friends have it. But that could only bring a couple of weeks or a month of comfort, because if they get sick next month, we would expect another test, I presume. So it just doesn't seem like we can pull that off at this moment in time. And like I said, there is some reason to believe our testing ability is improving, and we could see more and more of that every day. When it gets to the point where we can test more broadly and get a better feeling of comfort among the medical community and among the scientists, then that'll be good. But today, that's just not happening. Hospitalizations regionally support the low viral activity. Now, this is not a scientific analysis. This is me saying, well, in the Sioux Falls area today, they have 60 people, 60 COVID patients in the hospital today. And they've had over 100 of them be in the hospital at one point or the other. In our area, I believe we've had one person identified as being a COVID patient who's been hospitalized. And by the way, anyone with a respiratory illness who gets admitted to the hospital gets a test. And so they feel comfortable in this hospital system that they are not allowing infected individuals into the hospital without a test. So anyway, I conclude then that we're looking at month-old data, that there could be time to make some modifications to the city ordinance to ensure uniform social distance implementation throughout the community, instead of focusing on the 8% of the businesses. I think it would make more sense to focus on 100% of the businesses to help reduce the risk of the restricted businesses reopening. And you don't have to be a statistician to know that right now we have some closed restaurant dining rooms and some bars and fitness clubs, and when we reopen those, it makes sense that we're going to expose ourselves to a little more risk. And so going citywide with the restrictions would appear to take that into account. Ultimately, to protect access to life-saving hospital resources. That's still the goal. That's still the primary goal, to make sure that our hospital doesn't get overrun with patients so that they can't treat all of the COVID patients or the non-COVID patients who would need that resource. So the curve is flat today. And I already got in trouble for saying this next thing. Someone already yelled at me for this. But I conclude in my own mind that the fact that we're flat today cannot be solely because we have closed or otherwise regulated 8% of our businesses when 92% are still open. It has to be flat for a variety of reasons, including our community response to the threat of COVID-19. And so the next logical step is to balance the threat of the virus with the threat being created by a faltering economy. Food security is decreasing among the lower income population in our communities. The demand for food assistance is increasing. The food supply to the local nonprofit distributors is at risk of decreasing. They're seeing signs of it. Major food production facilities are being shut down nationwide, affecting the national food supply. Smithfield and Sioux Falls, Tyson, 2 plants on the East Coast that are going to not only close down, but they're going to kill 2 million animals and turn them into something other than food, because there are no employees on site to take care of them, feed them, or process them. And JBS USA, which is in Colorado, it's a major beef processing plant. So the CEO of Tyson, in his or her opinion, I don't have the name, stated very clearly that we're seeing signs that the national food chain is breaking. I believe our duty is to avoid a collision of the demand increase and the food supply decrease. And also keeping in mind that not all of everyone's employees qualify for unemployment. And if and when they do, it will be temporary, especially the COVID supplement to that unemployment. So where possible, those out of work should return to work to become self-sufficient again. So the proposed new restrictions, the next 4 slides are a regurgitation of everything that is on the agenda, linked to the agenda. It is the meat out of the resolution that the council will consider tonight, so I won't go over all of these. But I will say that regarding the 125 square feet, I think this is how government is supposed to work. The government proposes something. The people who know the business better or who have different opinions get a hold of the government and they say, are you sure about that? What are you thinking here? What was the rationale? And it forces us to come up with an answer to those type of questions. Forces us to maybe try to see that more from the business owner point of view. That's, and I got to tell you right now, Jim, how many people might be watching this? So we have 1,000 people watching this meeting live right now. Do you know, when we're not in a pandemic, we have about 80 people view our council meeting online over 6 months. This is more interaction with the government than I would say we have had in decades, probably since the flood. So this is how the government works. We propose something. You guys collectively say, we think there's a problem with that. We want you to reconsider, and we do. So tonight, I'm guessing there's going to be some debate and problem solving going on here on the 125 feet. Okay, so all the rest of it, if you have access, you do have, the public has access to this. I'm just going to breeze through these to save some time and get to the end. Also, someone, Mrs. Mueller, brought up families not being able to sit together. The proposal, we learned something from imposing the city ordinance a month ago. We learned that we can't think of everything, every scenario. So we had businesses calling saying, what about this situation? What about that situation? It gave us some real-time experience, understanding that we have to make some adjustments. And so we're writing that into this resolution, that we understand we're not going to think of everything. And for specifically families, we would not attempt to impose a 6-foot standard on a family when you're literally going to drive back home and live together right after your meal or your drink. So also the resolution is set to remain in effect until May 31st, unless otherwise repealed, modified, or extended. So again, seen as a temporary measure of indefinite duration, depending on circumstances. So odds and ends that aren't in this resolution, city facilities such as the swim center and tennis courts and basketball courts and those kind of things that will be handled separately. We'll make separate independent decisions on those from a best practice standpoint or from an operations standpoint. Also, none of the new regulations proposed in this measure take the place of safe practices such as social distancing. And high-risk groups should continue to stay home. We've had a lot of angry contacts from high-risk individuals that say, you know, I have all of these conditions, and if you open these up, I'm gonna face a higher risk. And I just think that the advice generally from the CDC on down is if you're immune compromised, this is a time when you want to be asking someone else to do your shopping for you. Enforcement, education, also got in trouble for saying it this way too, but we're going to focus on education and compliance. We're not going to run out there on day one with a ticket book and start trying to force people into compliance. We've had a good response from the business community. I've been invited out to view businesses to see their new proposed seating arrangements, and we're going to use code enforcement officers to be there for, number one, citizen complaints, because there will be citizen complaints. One thing this pandemic has given us is 1,000 or so observers in the community who want to point out what someone's doing wrong. And there's a lot of merit to that because it really keeps all of us accountable. Okay, so emphasis on The voluntary compliance will mean our code enforcement officers will go out to the site either on the business owner's request to look things over, to give advice, to help problem solve, or on the basis of a complaint. But that's how we're going to handle that. And we'll put more additional resources in there as needed. But let's not kid ourselves. We're not going to get 100% compliance with every individual or every business in this community. Keep in mind that 38,000 people die every year in America on our roads and highways from traffic accidents, and the majority of those were violating some rule that was written to protect them from that situation. Humans have free will, and we, from the first 2 humans on Earth, we learned that you have a decision to obey or disobey the rule. So we shouldn't be surprised if we find someone behaving dangerously. We will talk to them, counsel them. If we have an egregious violator who won't conform, then we'll take a different action for that individual. Future risk mitigation. The ordinance, this measure must be as fluid as the problem being addressed. That is unconventional for government action. Typically, governments put rules or laws in order and they stay on the books for 150 years until someone realizes we don't ride horses down the street anymore. And so someone will take that rule off the books. So it's unconventional, but these are unconventional times. So we need to be prepared to adjust as needed. So we're taking comments on this plan. You can send comments to mayor's office at rcgov.org or call 394-4110. And for this and other public meetings in the future, you may send a message for public comment, for public meetings, by going to our COVID page, which is rcgov.org/COVID, and there's a link there to submit a public comment. So that's what I have for you tonight, and now we are going to go to Laura Armstrong for another quick presentation.
Mine won't be as lengthy. Hello? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I just wanted to put some slides together to share where my head is at. What I'd like to do first is start with the timeline for the last 5 weeks. A lot of information has happened. So on March 22nd, we had our special city council meeting addressing this ordinance. 2 days later, the state was notified about the Smithfield outbreak. The public was not made aware. 2 days later, the mayor, Mr. Lewis, and I sent a letter to the Department of Health because we had concerns about the lack of information, lack of testing, and most concerning, the lack of transparency. The next evening, this ordinance was approved and it went into effect the very next day. About 5 days later, there was a private phone call or conference call with the 3 main healthcare facilities, Avera, Sanford, and Monument Health, with Governor Noem. 3 days later, a mandatory school building closure was ordered for the rest of the year. We still didn't know what was going on. 2 weeks after our state was advised about the Smithfield outbreak, then on April 10th, the public was made aware. As of last week, last Monday, only 343 tests were done in Pennington County. Yes, antibody tests did start 7 days ago as well. That's a little bit of good news. But just yesterday, the Rapid City Journal reports only 800 tests were completed in West River. And if you wonder how many counties are in West River, I looked it up. That's 60. So 60 counties got 800 tests. And the priorities went to our healthcare workers and our first responders, rightly so. or you had to qualify by being 65 years of age or older, have an autoimmune disease, and presenting with a fever, cough, and shortness of breath. So that begs the question, how much of the general population of 60 counties got that test? Not much, less than 3%. And here we are making a major decision based on less than 3%. Would you bet $1 million on 3% of the information? Would you bet your life? Would you bet somebody else's life? I wouldn't. CDC guidelines, we know this. Wash your hands, avoid close contact, cover your coughs and sneezes, clean and disinfect. But this is the big one, masks and social distancing. We have 34 people in this room right now. About a third are wearing a mask right now. So that shows me that only a third of this population in this area are taking these measures seriously. The White House recommendations, these need to be satisfied before proceeding to a phased comeback. With symptoms and cases, you need to have a downward trajectory for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. In addition, hospitals are supposed to be doing robust testing, 800 tests over the last 5-6 weeks. That's not robust testing. The Institute of Health Metrics. This is what Dr. Fauci refers to. This is what the White House Task Force refers to. If you look right, wrong one. If you look, right there, there's South Dakota. The projected is June 8th, but it specifically states that this would only be valid if the state had been following strict containment and social distancing measures. We're not. Despite the Smithfield outbreak, Sioux Falls has not implemented any either. The I-90 corridor has been wide open and consistently busy, and Sioux Falls is just a short 5-hour drive away. This graph at the bottom, this is an upward trajectory. Mr. Nordstrom, this is the hill that you were referring to just last week. Our state recommendations, same CDC guidelines. We still have school building closures throughout the remaining school year. Rightly so. We want to protect our children, our school workers, and our community. The peak is a mere 44 days away. No one is talking about aerosolization or ventilation. Nobody's talking about this in our casinos, our bars, or our restaurants. That's why it's important to wear a mask. Everybody should be wearing a mask, not a third of the population. Those heavier droplets drop and sink. But the other ones, what you are all breathing in right now, they can stay in the air up to 3 hours. This is a restaurant. This is an actual study. This person, A1, right there, infected 9 people in a restaurant. Even with the signage, many people are still not following social distancing or following the recommended guidelines. We're not doing it in this room either. We have more people in here than we should. My personal observations last week, there was a going away party at my office. In a 20-square-foot radius, we had 9 people standing around, no masks, open food, elbow to elbow. I took a picture of it. I couldn't believe it. We all went on an emergency shelter tour last Thursday. There were 50 community leaders. We were all wearing masks, but again, clusters of people. Big box stores that were mentioned. You're right. There's too many people in there. Packed parking lots, people around food trucks. This is going on. This is not helping us. If we're not testing, we do not have reliable numbers, nor do we have evidence-based data. We still have a shortage of tests and materials. The majority of the testing is going on in East River, by what the mayor said, so we have to wait till there's an outbreak before we can get more tests? 800 tests in 60 counties over the last 5 weeks is abysmal. And people keep referring to this skewed data that's on the State Department of Health website. Our physicians do not believe in that data, our healthcare workers do not believe in that data, and I do not believe in that data. And for us to hold on to this is the gospel is incorrect. We'll know more as we do more testing, and especially more antibody testing, but that's only started a week ago. We have a nurse triage hotline. They're not sharing information that should be in that data for all to see. We don't know how many people did not qualify for a test. We don't know how many people were told to stay home and self-quarantine. We don't know how much community spread occurred, and we still don't know what community spread is occurring right now. I was on a conference call, again, with Monument Health, and their two main concerns are compliance and tourism. If the local people aren't following these guidelines, what makes you think these tourists will? And how smart is it to lift the restrictions and then set them back down, and lift and set them down? It's not a good business model. Good luck putting that genie back in the bottle. What needs to happen? Mandatory masking when out in public. Everybody. Everybody needs to do it. Do it for yourself. Do it for your neighbor. Just do it. We need robust testing like the White House is recommending. Robust testing. We need more public compliance. We have our physicians, our local physicians that treat us, that treat our parents, treat our children, our family, and our friends. They know us intimately. And they're saying, we need more time, we need more tests, we need more data. If you expect our healthcare providers to practice evidence-based medicine, then council members should be following suit. We need to make evidence-based decisions. Thank you.
Okay, get ready for the strobes. Not bad. Okay, I have a proposal for the council. You'll have to vote on it. My proposal, since there looks like there's going to have to be a little problem solving going on here, is that we have a open discussion. You suspend the rules on the first part of this, but this open discussion would not include a motion. Then at the time when that's done, then we would reinstate the rules and make the floor open for a motion. It's completely your choice, or we can go forward however you wish. I just wanted to recommend that. Thoughts from anyone? Okay, we have a motion from Greg Stroman to have an open discussion, suspending the rules for the open discussion. Yep, and a second by Chad Lewis. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and have an open discussion. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I'll call your name as you get in the queue. Not everyone jump in at once. Greg Stroman. Yes, you may.
Bob, would you come up, please, and can I ask you a quick question? So you talked about this occupancy ratio. Could you go into that a little more? And does that occupancy, does that apply to patrons or patrons and staff, or what does it apply to?
Our occupancy rate is how many patrons we can have in a location, and basically every business as you come into it will have a number on the wall. That number is the total amount of people that can be in the room at any given time. And I believe that that would probably include employees. So when we came up with, or we're looking at 28 square feet, that is approximately at our location, with a little calculating, that is approximately when we take the number on the wall divided by 2, that came out to about 28 square feet. And that's what Omaha, I just heard earlier today, is going to, that number. I was doing a little calculating. This would be kind of tough, but right off the bat, if we hit it real fast here, we're looking at about 26 feet wide, 52 feet the other direction. So we got 26 times 52 equals 1,300 square feet divided by 125. That means we'd have about 10 people in this area. This is 6-foot spacing right now. We can count how many people are here. We could go down, in order to keep our 6-foot spacing, we could go down on that and go to 28 square feet is where I'm going with that. And basically the idea of the number, and why I was using the number on the wall, is when an enforcement type person comes in, how do you decide how many square feet are really there? So it would be real easy for them to just look at the wall. Okay, it says 100, they can have 50 people. Okay, 50 people, we're good to go. So that's where I was going with that, and it makes it real easy. It makes it real black and white, and there's not a lot of guessing going on whether we would be complying or not. And as far as all the rest of it goes, wearing a mask, doing our due diligence like we always do, but we're good with all the other ideas that the mayor proposed. The only thing we're asking for is the 6-foot spacing, which is 28 square feet.
One other thing, so like in a couple of your places, there are more than one floor. How does that apply to like the main floor and the upstairs of the firehouse or at Cape Pasa?
We just added, when we added all that square footage together, we come to about 4,000 square feet. So we were adding that up separately.
So would it be per floor, though? I mean, is that what you're talking about for occupancy per floor?
Correct. I mean, it would be just as if we took the top part and put it beside the other one. That's our total square footage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I yield.
Anyone else? Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I ask Mr. Lingus to come forward?
Yep, he would like to.
Yeah, if you'd like to. Thank you for your presentation as well. I appreciate the feedback. Have you had a chance to do some calculations on your facility using the 125 square feet?
Yeah, we have, Councilman. The 125 square foot in our facility, we have about 5,100 square feet. That allows us to have about 40 at the 125. And if, I don't know how many are familiar with our area, but that's well more than the 6 feet distance. It would spread people pretty thin, and it makes it, you know, hard to justify opening the dining rooms and things. Actually, at Bob's logic, I did the math as we had this conversation, and it comes out that about 50% of the capacity of our restaurant is in that same logic that Bob had. So that number coincides with Bob's. Our seating, our capacity that the fire marshal gave is about 168, I think. So we cut it in half. We're down to 80. So we actually laid out our restaurant with the 6-foot spacing, and we have room for about 88 that way. If we cut it down, with the 6-foot moving tables, you know, closing tables, closing basically the bar down. Our bar normally seats about 22. With the 6-foot spacing, that's down to 5 people at the bar itself. So, you know, it's pretty limiting to what we do. But with the 6-foot spacing, we were able to get about 88 people when we just did it. But cutting that down comes to be about 84. You know, when we used to use the occupancy. So it's really close to how we've already spread it apart. So definitely that 50% capacity would be sufficient to get the safe distancing, safe spacing, The other concern I think I would have with going too small on the number that's in there is then it's going to create you know, not everybody might agree with this, but our indications from our customers is we're going to have a lot of people that want to come back. And the fewer people that we're allowed in, we're going to have a problem with dealing with that, lining them up and everything else. You know, we'll keep them apart, but that's going to get more and more. So the more people we can get in safely and get them to their area and keep them apart inside, you know, we think is a better solution.
Follow up, if I may. Scott, have you done some calculations using a hypothetical number of people that would be coming in as families? Would that change that 80 people?
Well, the 80 would be if we had all four at a table. So actually it's going to be less than that in there, because if they're not all in the same household, you know, if we have singles or twos, they're going to take a table for four, and that's all that's going to be there. So it's actually going to be, that would be a maximum under perfect conditions where we had 4 people from every household sitting at those tables. We might have one come in and, you know, or 2 or 3, but right now we're planning for 4 at a table, and if they're 4 at a table under the same household, that'll work. Otherwise, it's going to even be down from that.
And then have you considered extending hours? Right now, most of the businesses that have been giving me feedback is a certain number of people per hour. How would it work for you if you could extend your hours to so that we have number of people per day versus people per hour?
You know, we've actually reduced hours now because of
Yes.
the curbside, so we'd probably, you know, my initial thought would be we'd go back to our normal business hours, which we increase a little bit in the summer anyway because we tend to get more customers when it gets lighter out. People just stay out longer. So that's probably what we would go to. You know, if demand was there, that people wanted to come in other times, we'd sure be open to that. But right now, we would just probably go back to our normal, just to go normal to start with, normal business hours.
Last question for you. Have you done the distance testing, the calculations for the 6 feet?
We've set it all up that everything's 6 feet apart.
Okay.
And we had done that prior as well. And to a certain degree, it was basically just us closing almost every other table down to get that. Not quite, but reconfiguring a little, but closing about every other table.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments. And I'm just going to wind up with saying that I've been using the new string theory, is 6 feet going that way, but you have to also consider going 6 feet this way as well. So that makes it 12 feet, and I'm in the middle making that 6 feet. So that's a different calculation. So I was wondering if you had had a chance to review that.
Yeah. Well, we won't have anybody closer than 6 feet in any direction.
Very good.
From there.
Thank you. I yield.
Well, while you're deciding who wants to talk next, I'll just share with you, I had a conference call today with South Dakota mayors and learned that there are several special council meetings going on tonight in various cities around the state to relax their initial regulations. The only one hesitating would be Huron in Beadle County, which had one of the fastest, earliest outbreaks. And so they extended their ordinance for a while. That's happening, and then the governor tomorrow is expected to sign a new executive order as part of her getting back to normal plan, which is believed to be some relaxing of the previous executive order bullet points. So now we have Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really think I have questions, but I might, so I'm just going to be kind of riffing here. So with the COVID numbers, I have decided that I believe Monument and the CDC because I have no other numbers to look at. I can't project. I don't have a science degree, so I'm going to believe the numbers that are given to me by experts. I voted for the first closure. That was when I had different information. Everything looked much bleaker at that time, and I didn't think that we could actually prevent a major outbreak. But obviously, through the citizens and through the action of the council and the action of the social businesses, we have done a remarkable thing. And with, I think we need to relook at what we did and help people get back to work. I really do. We've never in human history quarantined healthy people. This is really unusual. We quarantined sick people. We're quarantining healthy people, which is really rare and really unusual. And I don't know if I agree with it anymore. So I've looked at those kinds of facts as well. Our numbers, if they grow, this time we'll know why. We'll actually know why, okay? Because you guys are going to be our experimental group. So if we have a lot of social gatherings and a lot of people that are together and our numbers grow, we'll know why this time. With Menards and Walmart and those places, you know, I never go there, so I don't know how busy they are. Here it's crazy. But I'm pretty sure we don't require that they clean their toilets every time someone leaves their bathroom. And you guys are going to have to go above and beyond regular restrictions to be able to open. And I thank you for that. You've really thought this through. And I saw some of the plans from different businesses, and they're really good. I went online yesterday and I asked workers how they were feeling, you know, the people that are out of work. How are you doing? You know, how are you doing? Some of them had real horror stories about their employers. Others had really great stories about how their employers really helped them and really stepped up for them. Some of them don't want to go back to work. They're either afraid of COVID or they're doing better without their working jobs. So I got a lot of information from people that were in the trenches. That's what I wanted to hear from. As usual, everything kind of went south and people started making comments that had nothing to do with me asking workers how they were doing. So I had to shut it down. But I did get a lot of information on personal message because people didn't want to reveal who they were when they were talking about their businesses. Some said to me, 2 people said to me, they were being mocked for wearing masks. So that's something that you guys are going to have to work on. You know, this is serious. This is not a joke. You know, I took my mask off. I'm more comfortable talking without a mask on. But, you know, we can't have employees telling each other that you're afraid, you're paranoid, you are, you know, not American, or whatever it is for wearing a mask. You're being safe. You're protecting other people. It doesn't protect you from getting it. It protects you from giving it. Another thing is everyone is also an expert on microbiology suddenly. That's kind of interesting. We can reopen, but some businesses might choose to stay closed. I don't know what effect that'll have on our sales tax numbers. I mean, as a council, we're worried about where we're going to be, you know, with a big hole in our budget as well. You know, you're not the only people suffering from this, okay? We're going to have to make some real decisions. And it'll be tough. It'll be tough for everybody. But we can't go back to sales tax unless we have people opening. But we can't have you know, I can't force an assisted living place to say you got to let people in. Can't do that. If they decide the best way for them to protect their people is to keep their doors locked, that's up to them to decide. I think we've learned more than just about a virus through this period. We've learned that local elections are very important. I mean, I would have never guessed that I would have to sit here and think about closing businesses and saving lives. So we have usually about 35% or less of people voting in this city in our elections. They matter. The people who sit here matter. They matter to your business. They matter to your health. They matter to your community. Get out and vote. Get out and run. You know, you're going to need people that'll lead. Get smart. And think about what you're doing when you're opening your businesses again, because I believe it'll happen. One of the things I've got to say about our community is we protected our vulnerable populations. We set up something at the Civic Center. It's something I'm extremely proud of, because if COVID gets into our homeless populations and the lesser economic groups here, then we have, it runs rampant, and we know that for a fact. So those things that were done by the mayor and the police chief, and I'm not sure who else, thank you, because that really puts us all at less risk. I wouldn't oppose a fine if we find out that people are not complying and waving their fingers at us as we walk out the door. I would not oppose a fine if we find out people are just generally saying, nope, you know what, we're going to open up, we're going to do what we want. And I think if we have to teach them a lesson, sometimes people need a stick. Sorry. And we will know more soon. The second wave that we're worried about, we're going to see that in Australia and down in New Zealand. We're going to see that in the Southern Hemisphere because they're going into their winter now. So we'll know a lot more very soon. So I'm not going to be afraid. I loved Laura Armstrong's presentation. Is very passionate and she's very knowledgeable. But I just think that we're going to have more information, and it's time we can say, go ahead, open up, be responsible. Or if we see those numbers coming back, there's nothing we'll be able to do then. We'll be in a position where we're like, okay guys, it's closing for real now. So, and I don't want to blame the owners. I don't want to blame the staff. It'll just be the way it is, because we won't have a choice. So that's how I feel about, that's just kind of my head, what I heard tonight and what I need to say to you guys. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for complying for now. And I hope that we can go forward as a community and not have a major swell. I don't want to have that curve. So thank you very much.
Bill Evans.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Darla, for your very thoughtful comments. It's going to make my speech a lot shorter because I agree with absolutely everything you said. It's an easy task for one whose foot is outside of calamity to give advice and to rebuke the sufferer. And those are the words of Aeschylus from 2,000 plus years ago. And that's the situation we find ourselves in right now. Making decisions that may seem easy to some people out there because you're suffering, but trust me, these are not easy decisions, and we feel your pain for sure. And I personally have been justifying my decisions based upon data and not my personal feelings, and the data has changed. And now we see it in a different light because we have a bigger cross-section of things to look at than we did a few weeks ago. I love the comments of the young man, Mr. Wolf, that spoke earlier. I got to tell you, if we're in the hands of kids like that in a few years, we're in great shape. And I hope he keeps coming back to talk to us because I thought it was beautifully put, eloquent, factual, and passionate, yet not ridiculously. So it was just right. So congratulations to him. Now, I agree that with Mr. Fuchs out there that we need to modify this space arrangement. It doesn't really take into consideration families of 5 sitting together, and I think there's going to be modifications to that. But like Darla said, it's going to be the weak link that takes us to where we don't want to go. It's only going to take one person driving in to spend the night in Rapid City. They come from a hot spot to go out to the bar, and they're all dancing around and partying, and they send 200 people out into our community unaware that they may have been infected that night. And then we find ourselves in 4 days, a week, exactly where Sioux Falls was when, you know, we've done a great job, let's face it. We had, what was it, 8 cases and a death before they had anybody out there, as I recall. And we've managed again to dodge the bullet, and that's largely through everybody being careful, early implementation and other things. But we have to be vigilant, we have to be diligent, we have to be cautious. You know, in a vigil, you're awake when you should be sleeping, okay? That's what it means. And so if you're vigilant, you're preparing for something that's going to happen. And it probably will happen. So we have to be on the lookout for that sort of things. I think Mrs. Weaver spoke earlier about America is optimistic and not pessimistic. And I agree with her. She's correct. But America is also not stupid. And that's one thing we have to take into consideration. I'm going to quote here what Mayor Cuomo said. It's not about your life. You don't have the right to risk somebody else's life. And you don't have the right, frankly, to take a healthcare staff and people who are literally putting their lives on the line and be cavalier or reckless with them. And so that's what it's about, and that's the reason we have to be really, really conservative. Now, there are some creative things going on out there. I got a call from a friend in Michigan. Evidently, out there, they've got some implementations that work. Say, Walmart is no longer selling paint. They want the local business to go to things that local businesses can provide. I don't know if such creative things are possible around here. But I do know that I'm going to, again, really applaud Mayor Allender. I think his presentation was beautiful. I think it was well thought out, and I think it's a privilege to be serving with him right now. So I guess that's it, but thank you again, Mr. Mayor Allender. I think you're doing a great job. So I yield.
Thank you. Becky Drury.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Darla, for all those great words you had tonight. Well said. I just have a couple thoughts. I think the hospital's ready to meet the needs of the community should we have something happen. We've given them a month to prepare. So, and I'm grateful for that month. And I think this resolution is really nimble enough that if we need to make changes, we can do it. I mean, here we were here a week ago. We are all willing to come here and do these votes and be ready to make the changes. So it's nimble enough to let us do that. So I appreciate that. I don't really like the comparisons to other pandemics or anything because we live in a totally different world. Our means of communication have all changed. There were probably people when the pandemic went through and people died, they had no clue what it was. We are informed. We have much more informed public now. And I see people wearing their masks. I bet almost 80% of the people could tell you what you're supposed to do. We all know, wash your hands, wear a mask, stay physically separated from people, stay home. And especially if you have compromised immune systems, please stay home. No matter what we pass tonight, be safe. And that's what I think everyone on this council really wants for our community. I'm thankful for the book. The gentleman, I believe he's gone now, but I'm thankful that he passed that out to us. I think that's encouraging to have people want us engaged and have examples and things to read. I think it's great. The other thing we need to do is exercise. So stay distant, exercise, stay home if you can, wash your hands, cover your face. But you know what? We live in the United States of America. And we have freedoms, and I'm not willing to tromp on them anymore. Darla was right. We're quarantining healthy people, not the sick ones. And I, for one, am not going to live in fear. I yield.
Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what I can really add to a lot of this, but what the heck. They certainly didn't put pandemic on my election posters. I don't think anybody else did out there as well, so I think we've, doing our best to try to figure that out as we go, and I think the entire country is doing that, actually the entire world at this point. But, you know, one of the reasons we probably did this a little early, and I don't know if we did it early or not, we'll never know, we'll never be able to prove it one way or the other, is I wrote an email to the mayor prior to all the first council meeting saying if you didn't have a council meeting, I was going to do it myself. And I'm saying that because I know he's taking a lot of slack or a lot of crap for saying that, you know, we jumped on it too early. Well, you can put that blame on me. I just was asking these questions early, and in February I was asking about it and asking if we had any kind of plan as a city, and we didn't. And of course, you know, no one expected this sort of thing. So I say all that because I think it's, you know, it's important that we try to be honest about things here. I've got a friend who's a really excellent investor, does a lot of investing on his own, and he manages other people's stuff, but he does it basically by himself. And he had another friend of ours who had a lot of money who wanted to learn to be a day trader. And by the end of 2 months, our other friend lost a whole bunch of money. And I asked him why. He said, well, because he says, I think so, I think it's going to change, things like that. And those are the kind of words that you can't use when you're making tough decisions. When we made our first decision, it was based upon the data at the time and all the stuff that we had before us. And the models were showing, you know, 2.5 million Americans dead. I mean, who's not going to want to respond to that? I certainly did. And I think most of us up here try to do our best to do the same. But, you know, I used science and facts, and I still believe in them, when I made my first decision. But right now I'm being faced with facts that just don't measure up to what the reality is right now. Right now we don't have anybody in the hospital from COVID. And now that's more than likely going to change, but I can't prove that. I think is not a good way to describe that. I have not seen it. I'm sure that it probably will happen, but I can't base my decisions up here today upon what I believe. I'm trying to base them off of what I know. And I want you to understand that, because I want you to trust when we make these decisions later, if we have to make another decision to shut things down again, it's based upon reality, and it's based upon facts, and it's based upon, you know, the situation as it exists. And I realize there is a 2-week, you know, period where this can be already happening to us. We don't even know it for another 2 weeks. But right now, as the facts stand, we don't have anybody sitting in the hospital. The hospitals are not overrun. And I spoke to a lot of hospital people, a lot of doctors before I made the first decision. I made a lot of contacts this week as well, because I really value their opinions, and the people who are working on the front line, and the ER docs especially. And those are the facts. They're not overrun. The ER is not overrun. But what I do know is that this virus is not going away. If history teaches us anything, this virus will be around. And it probably is again, fall, winter, somewhere along those lines. And if you look at the history, I'm sorry, Becky, but, you know, history may not always repeat itself, but definitely rhymes. And I think the pandemic of 1819, 1957, you know, swine flu, all those things, they will come back around. It'll come and hit us again. But what I'm hoping is we obviously bought time, right? Bought time for ourselves to prepare. We can't stay home forever, though. We just can't. It just isn't possible. You can't shut down an economy forever and just expect a society to live. So some way along the line, we're going to have to either develop a vaccine, which, you know, is a possibility, maybe. I'm not a scientist, so I can't speak to this, but I would say that from what people I've spoken to that do understand these things, the coronavirus is probably a hard vaccine to come up with, but maybe they will eventually. But I know that we're going to have to somehow learn to adapt and eventually gain some sort of immunity as a people. And I don't think we do that by just opening everything up and, you know, hurting everybody immediately. But I think what we need to do is we need to learn to condition ourselves as a society. And that's the thing some of these new restrictions are going to help do, is they're going to, you know, right now we don't have a lot of restrictions on ourselves. You can't go to the bar, and you can't go eat in a restaurant, but you can go run around the park and no one's going to do anything to you. There's no rules on that. But if we start conditioning people to, you know, they've already started to do it themselves a little bit. I'm starting to do it more. I'm not wearing a mask up here, by the way, Ms. Armstrong, because I'm trying not to panic the public. I want them to, you know, I like to be honest with them, but I wear one to and from, and I wear when I go out. But I think that we need to learn to as a society, get used to seeing people in restaurants with masks on. They do it all over Asia all the time. It's pretty normal. If you're sick, you wear a mask, because the mask is for you. It's for them. It's not for me. If I'm already sick, I'm going to pass it on to you, and that's why I'm wearing a mask. The mask doesn't really protect you that much on the other side. It helps, but it doesn't really cut it completely. But, so we've taken a lot of steps lately. We've got that, as Darla pointed out, we have that nice facility down at the Civic Center that was put together by our emergency response team, headed by Dustin Willett, who does a great job for the county. And I've been through it. It's something that's really a good idea because our homeless population is extremely vulnerable. And if they get sick, you know, they don't have any place to heal. And so they just wander around and they hand it off to everybody they see. So great job on that. I can tell you right now, I have a hard time believing that our world as we know it's going to stay the same just because of this or something else. But we're going to see a lot of changes in the world. But right now, I think it's very important that we start learning to do this, to adapt, to expose ourselves a little bit to it. I still want everybody to stay home that doesn't need to be out and about. There's no reason to go running around. And to the restaurants, I don't know. Good luck. I hope you can make it. I don't know how many people are actually going to go out and eat, but they probably will. But the simple fact, once again, is we just can't shut down forever. And well, I think this is still too soon. I really do. I just can't ignore the facts in front of my face. I mean, the facts are right now there's nobody in the hospital. And I know testing is obviously an issue, but what difference does it make if you're testing positive if you don't go to the hospital at this point? If you're not sick enough, you need a doctor. That's my one thing I would say. You know, the tourists are going to hit here, and hopefully we'll have some sort of protocols, and our people will be used to the protocols, and they'll start practicing those, and it'll help us protect us from the tourists coming here, because that's the biggest problem we're going to have was when they get here. And so I want to make sure that, you know, I really don't like this. I don't want to open up right now, but I can't sit there and tell you I based my first decision upon the facts and the models when right now I'm looking at it and it's just the facts don't support continuing in it right now. So that's why I'm going to, you know, vote for this. But there's restrictions here, and those restrictions we haven't had before. And I think that's something that's important to note, is these restrictions did not exist before this. So now we're going to a situation where you actually have restrictions. But I will willingly vote for that because the restrictions are there. If it was open it up and no restrictions, I'd say no, I'd never vote for that. But I think that we need to do something. I mean, I do find it kind of ironic that Wyoming and Montana, the two biggest, you know, makes me feel like I'm from California when I go to those states. They're shut down, but we're not. But, and Mr. Mayor, as much as I respect you, car accidents are not contagious, sir. Just throwing that out there for you. So anyway, I will be supporting this somewhat reluctantly. I do think, though, as a society, it's going to be very hard to not have to face this, you know, on some level. And if it does change and when numbers start getting like Sioux Falls, we're going to have to relook at this. And I would definitely support, you know, stronger measures at that point. So I appreciate everybody testifying. You know, Ms. Armstrong, you're a hero, and I do admire what you do, and I do support your belief system. I just think from my perspective at this point, I have a viewpoint that we have to support what I see in front of me. So thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do want to thank you, too, for all the hard work you put into this, talking to business owners, you know, looking at another side to this. And I do very much agree with some of the things Mr. Lewis just said. You know, this is going to probably be our new normal. There's going to be either this virus or another virus or something else coming across, you know, maybe for the rest of our lives. We don't know. But the problem is we can't hide from it. We got to deal with it. And I'm glad that we haven't had a lot of spread out here. You know, I'm glad that all the really bad comments I got originally of me going to kill hundreds or even thousands of people didn't, you know, happen because I took a little different stance than most of the people on this council. We will never know whether or not what we did made a difference. We won't know that. And even if we do open up, you know, and it looks like we are going to open up, even if we do get spread now, you know, we have to look at being able to trace these cases and where it comes from. You know, that at that point, like the mayor said, then more testing will become available, and that will happen at that time. And Mr. Lewis did bring up a good point. This could be just the first wave, like, you know, in 1918. I had a grandfather that told me a little bit about that pandemic, and if anybody wants to hear about it, I can tell you some other time. I'm not going to go into it now. He was 20 years old and lived in Rapid City when that happened. You know, from the very beginning, one of the things that really worried me is the fear. There was too much fear. There still is, in my opinion, too much fear. And we can't live our lives in fear. We just can't do it. We can't live our lives and have an open society and have a functioning economy. I think we've found that out. You know, it's very difficult because you are looking at all of this information that changes day to day and week to week and month to month. And there's so much misinformation out there that we find out 2 or 3 days later, or a week later, a month later. And I'm going to point one out, Laura, and you know how much I respect you. But Western South Dakota doesn't have 60 counties, it's got 20. So even you are passing a little bit of misinformation. So we got to be careful about what's out there. So, you know, life, life as we knew it probably is going to be different. Probably is going to be a lot different. But we still got to learn to live with it, and hopefully, we don't have a huge outbreak out here. And if we do, I think our hospitals are going to be able to handle it, and I hope we don't have a lot of deaths. I do 100% agree that people that are elderly, sick, have immune problems, they should social distance. But that should be their responsibility and their decision. Because there are elderly people out there that don't want to social distance. You know, Mr. Lewis said people weren't out eating. You know, I was still going out eating dinner once a week. I just wasn't eating dinner in Rapid City. You know, we will continue to go out and eat, my wife and I, you know, my family. And we will support the restaurants. We supported them in the takeout and the drive-thrus during this whole thing, but now we'll support them and we'll go out and sit down at Bob's restaurant or whoever else's restaurant that opens up. You know, I'll probably support Steve's Casino, you know. I mean, we as a society should have that option of if we want to go out, if we want to take that chance. It's a chance we're taking on our own. Nobody's forcing me to take that chance. I've said from the very beginning of this, I'm not afraid of this virus. I did have my antibodies tested, and it came back negative, and I thought I was positive. But it hasn't changed anything for me. I'm still not afraid of this virus. And I imagine at some point I will probably get it, you know, especially if we don't have a vaccine within the next 18 months. Will this virus kill me? Until I get it, I won't know that. You know, but I'm not going to live my life in fear of worrying about getting it because it could possibly kill me. So anyway, I'm going to support this. I'm also going to support this. I think that what we should do is we should limit to 50% of the capacity, the occupancy, because I think that is a lot easier to maintain, you know, from the city standpoint, rather than going by square footage, and every single business, we're going to have to know what their square footage is so we know what their occupancy would be. So I think that's a very easy, fair trade. I think that it keeps people safe, you know, and there still is a learning curve. There's a lot of people out there that need this social distance. There's a lot of people out there, you know, I'm going to go back to Sam's Club and Walmart, and you know, they're getting better. Every day they're getting better. But people are getting antsy. You know, Saturday when I was at Lowe's and Menards, they were extremely busy. And there was a lot of people in there that you're seeing just walking around without carts. And I think a lot of people are just wanting to get back out into society. I think people are looking for things to do. And I think that it's important, not only tax-wise, to get this economy opened back up, but I think it's important for people's mental health to be able to get out and be back out into society. And I'll take that one step back. I think everybody knows that I have a huge heart for people that have gone through suicide, like my wife and myself. And there has been an uptick in the country of suicides, partially because of people losing their jobs and their incomes. That has a big effect on that. And I hate to see that, because anybody like myself that's gone through that, I would never wish it on anybody in the world. So anyway, that's all I got to say, and hopefully we'll get things back to a little bit of normalcy. Thank you.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in particular for the casinos, I would ask that they remove any food that they serve. You know, I've seen lots of trays of snacks out that people just grab themselves, or popcorn and stuff like that. I'd really like to see that go away for a while. Bars, I'd recommend plastic cups for you and not washing your own, because you know, I had a problem with that, so I'd like to really see plastic cups. When we talk, lastly, when we're talking about the vaccine being 18 months away, yes, it probably is, but in the meantime, there'll be treatments. You know, we're getting some real factual information on the plasma, on how to, you know, cure the disease, and I think that we'll only just continue to see more progress in that way. So I'm putting my money on treatments, not a vaccine. I think we have the scientists that are working on it right now will get us somewhere, and I'm not going to make any rude comments about silly things that were proposed in the last week, but I think there's real legitimate cures that are coming, and I think that we'll see some treatments that will work to at least mitigate these symptoms for a while. Thank you.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the business people coming in here tonight, and Mr. Lenga, thank you for the education, and I've also spoken to Mr. Fuchs about his situation, and so I really appreciate your insights and giving me the additional information. We just have to work out this new string theory here. It's an inside joke, so I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is opening slowly. It's not opening up the doors wide open and everybody go do what they want to do wherever they want to go. This is a slow opening. Some people call it a soft opening. And I feel very comfortable with what the new guidelines or recommendations are getting presented to us tonight. Mayor did an excellent job of putting all that, the meat of this recommendation on the screen in the PowerPoint presentation, so hopefully everybody's got a chance to read it. I posted them up on Facebook here, and oh my God, just the responses that I got back from both sides of the spectrum on that. I went back and rethought about my story of the Marine, that I heard his story and going up the hill, and now for my metaphor is that Marine now that had that encounter during the Vietnam era, they have now got ground support. I feel very comfortable that we have ground support coming in from the Monument Health and the data that's presenting to us. And their working model, I call it a 14-day rolling model, so that if it can be worked out and we need to make a change, that model will give us the good direction to comply with whatever we need to do next, whether it's tightening up or loosening up. That model will be a great assistance to us. They're still working on that model. It's not ready for prime time, but it is a model that they're working with to do some projections. So I feel very comfortable with that, the testing that's underway on that. Yes, it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect that I'm aware of. Is if there is anything perfect out there, the closest we got is a foggy crystal ball. And that's not very clear either. I just did a quick count, and I agree with, this is really tough for me to say that, no, not, I'm kidding. This is a new challenge for me, is to say that I agree with Councilman Roberts that we do have 20 West River counties, not 60. 66 counties in the entire state. So I just thought I'd make that compliment to Mr. Roberts for pointing that out. I also want to point out that we've got some new screening tools out there now. You can get them on your smartphones and also get them online. So those screening tools for the personal self-check, you can do it before you even give the triage nurse a call. But they also have a screening process to go through as well. Thank goodness we've got an extra 1,000 set of eyes out there now that is monitoring us and the community. And thank you for all of those that already told me that they're going to start calling in tomorrow on all the local businesses that are not compliant. I just don't see that happening, but if it happens, I feel the mayor's got a good process in place to make that happen. So we want to emphasize it's a slow opening. We're not opening up the doors, but with the mayor's accountability that he has to go through as well, he's using the code enforcement people to do the monitoring. When it gets into the enforcement, that takes it to another level. Hopefully we don't have to go there. Just hope we don't have to go there. In the meantime, I'm encouraging people to practice buying gift cards, do the drive-through, and if need be, do the curbside pickups as well. If you're not comfortable with going to a restaurant or a business, you have that choice. We're not making you go to any kind of business anywhere. It'll be still your choice to do. I did a little checking on the suicide rates as well, what's been happening on that. It might be happening nationwide, but here locally, it's not happening yet. The police department has reported to me that they've gotten some calls on it, but there's some different categories to be taken a look at, but the actual suicide happening within the Rapid City region has not taken place. The difficulty and the challenge with that is the Department of Health is 2 years behind, coming up on 3 years behind on the data, so we can't get any significant data from the Department of Health on the suicide rates. But right now, we're, yes, I agree with the mental health and that issue that's being presented to us. We have some new challenges in that area as well. And I think we've got the professionals out there in that field that be able to accommodate us and supply the information that's needed for those folks that are in need. Basically, what the mayor's put together is all these recommendations. It's not opening up the door. It is just a soft opening, slowly opening up the doors, but it's still got a lot of things that the local businesses and that 8% of businesses have to comply with this. And I've been told by a couple of businesses that they probably cannot even open up because of all of these new guidelines or recommendations. And a lot of other a couple of other companies, businesses told me that they've been working on some other ideas to be innovative. And I applaud them for their efforts of being that creative. So we may see some new potential norms, new normal for some of the local businesses. And I applaud everybody that has come forward to make their points and especially their comments, even though they were a lot of them coming up at me at Facebook. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
You done already? Sorry, Becky Drury.
Thank you, Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak twice. As some of you know, I haven't been here for 2 weeks because my husband and I did a self-quarantining so I could see my granddaughters. I got to see them today, actually touch them, not just FaceTime them, and we had a glorious day because it was beautiful outside and there's just nothing better than being face-to-face with your family. So I appreciate you putting up with me calling in to all the meetings the last couple of weeks. I wanted to say that real quick. I made masks while I was self-quarantined. This is one of them that I'm donning tonight. And I made them for friends, and I drive around town and I throw my plastic bag on their doorstep so they could have the mask. But as I was driving around, it really was kind of breaking my heart. You'd go down Main Street, and there were no cars. it was like we'd already gone through an apocalypse. And I thought, I voted for that. I did that. I felt terrible. And especially was feeling more and more terrible as the numbers were coming out. That we had no cases at the hospital, and the hospital was set to go and ready for them, and there was nobody to fill the beds. Grateful that there was no one to fill the beds, but sad as to what we'd done to the businesses. I just want people to know that this was a tough decision, and even tonight's a tough decision. And sometimes they're heart-wrenching. I yield.
Lance Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's get this moving forward. I make a motion to reinstate council rules.
Okay, we have a motion to reinstate by Lehman and a second by Roberts. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, rules are back on. Go to John Roberts.
Are we going to the ordinance right now? Do you need to read it in?
I read it.
You read it in? Okay, great. I'd like to make a couple of motions. One, I'd like to make a motion to, my brain just went dead, approve the emergency resolution. And I'd like to make a second to change the 125 square foot to half the occupancy.
Okay, we had a second by Becky Drury on that one. So the motion is for approval with the exception of the 125 square foot language and replacing it solely with a maximum occupancy, or would that be keeping the 6 foot distancing intact?
You know, I think it's going to be simpler to enforce it with half the occupancy. But you know, the half occupancy could be, it could be a recommendation, because if the 6 foot allows them, you know, more leeway. Bob, would you like to come up here? Can I ask you a question on this one? Because you're the one that brought that up. I hadn't even thought of it before. All the numbers that you've ran, that runs right into that roughly 30 square foot at half occupancy, correct?
Correct, it's the 28.
And excuse me, I think that's going to work straight across the board, because the fire department has our occupancy rates put on square footage. So you can have X number of people per square foot by the fire department, by the fire code. So it should work in every single business depending on the size of the occupancy. Or I mean the square footage.
You know, one thing that Scott said, and that's the way we'll lay out our restaurant too, is basically every other table will not be used. So therefore, we will get the 6 foot spacing. So that's the way we'll do it. It won't be a matter of a 4 top will only have 2 people. There'll be a 4 top here, this table's empty, 4 top here.
Yes,
That's the way
yes.
Scott explained it.
So I guess what I'm asking you is, doing the 6 foot spacing, can you get more family units in that way?
Well, yes.
Because I think the family units in this ordinance are kind of exempt. So if you, I'm just trying to figure out what's going to be easiest for the businesses. We're sitting here on the dais. I suppose we could, actually, I think I would like to make a substitute motion.
Right. The 6 foot spacing will work fine, and we'll deal with it that way. I'm good with an and or type idea either way.
Joel, go ahead.
Thank you. I think the way we're looking at it, so ideally if you go into a restaurant with a group of 4 people, it's all going to be 4 people that are from the same household. So the 6 foot restriction doesn't apply to that group. So they can sit, it was talked about earlier, you can sit at a table. It's the 6 foot separation between that group of 4 people and the table next to them, or people from a different household. Now I think we all know it's somebody again said it earlier, it's going to rely a little bit on the honor system and the businesses enforcing it. But let's be honest, people probably aren't going to be checking IDs to make sure that everybody at the same table is in a group. I think if you want to, I definitely think going to the half occupancy is much easier to enforce. It's going to make the enforcement easier. I would recommend at this point leaving the 6-foot separation between the tables in to meet the guidelines. I've been looking at, and I had prepared for tonight some other options as well. This would be one of them, the motion on the floor. So I think at this point, if we leave that in, I would also remind you that because this is a resolution and you can modify it by resolution, I mean, we could take a look at it again or revisit it again as soon as next Monday night.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. I'm comfortable with my motion then if my seconder's still comfortable with it.
Okay, so now
Thank you.
the motion was to approve the ordinance with the substitution of a 6-foot measurement and or.
That's already in there.
Right, but you're taking out the 125-foot.
So all I'm going to do, if you approve this motion, is I'm going to leave everything the same and substitute where it says, or one customer for, or half the occupancy. I might tweak the 10 customers a little bit because at that point, if we're just half the occupancy, maybe that, and that's all I'm going to change and everything else will stay in. I'll just alter that one sentence to say half the occupancy instead of one person for every 125 square feet.
But the 6-foot spacing.
The 6 foot is in actually subsection A and the 125 is in subsection B.
Good. Does everyone understand the motion now? Okay. All right. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just not comfortable with that just yet. The reason I'm saying that is because when I'm doing the math on it, it still comes out to 113 square feet. An area is 113 square feet, and if you add in the other portions of it, it is comes out to very close to be 125 square feet. So changing that to a smaller square footage area, I'm just not comfortable with that just yet. I need to take a look at that a little bit further, but keeping the area at 6 foot 6 foot distance from each side of us, that's 12 foot diameter, so it works out to be about 113 square feet. So I'm just not ready.
Right, but you're accounting for everyone having a 6 foot and no one sharing a 6 foot space.
Correct. Yes.
So if that applied, Laura and I would have to be 12 feet apart instead of 6.
No. No.
Yeah,
I've got a 6 foot string, goes out to John for 6 feet.
Right.
And if it goes out 6 feet the other direction, that's 12 feet.
But you're not accounting for the table.
Sure, but if
But I'm in the middle
if
for
John
6
gets 6 feet away from you,
Yep.
you're going to be sharing 3 feet of that middle space. So you'll still be 6 feet apart. The calculation of, if you squared it up, 6 by 6 would be 36 square feet.
Yep.
Yeah, I just
That's
want to
why
make
it doesn't work
some
out for me.
confusion there.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't work out for me. The 3 foot just does not work out.
Okay, so, all right. Anything else? Bill Evans.
Thank you. Maybe look at it this way, Mr. Nordstrom. We have 6 feet that way, 6 feet that way. That's squared 144 square feet. That's even more. Well, I think this isn't taking into consideration all the families that are together. I think on balance, they sort of average each other out. Singletons are going to be 6 feet apart from anybody else, and families are together. I think it just kind of averages, and the maximum occupancy is set, so it's kind of fixes itself that way.
Okay. Any other comments? Motion on the floor is to approve with a change to the 125-foot rule, adding 50% occupancy. Huh? Right. Yep. removing the 125, adding the 50% occupancy. Everything else is the same. Okay. We have a motion for approval on the floor. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, we have 2 noes, Nordstrom and Armstrong, so the motion passes. And now we'll go to Laura Armstrong for a moment of personal privilege.
Real quick, I apologize, I misspoke, and when I do, I really pride myself on having my facts straight, and I just wanted to apologize for that. 20 counties, thank you for correcting me. I don't take offense by that by any measure. I still think 800 tests in 20 counties in West River is still far too low. So when I'm wrong, I say so. I thank you for your time, and I am especially grateful for this council. You have done a tremendous job. Your research, talking with one another, talking with constituents. We have been respectful. We have done our homework. I couldn't be more proud. I'm not happy with the vote outcome, but that's how it goes, and I am proud of each and every one of you. Thank you.
Okay, any objection from anyone if we adjourn? Okay, all right, we are adjourned then. Thank you, everyone.